the record button, and we're going to talk about grace and empathy and sympathy and things of this nature, and some of the thoughts you have about that. So, are you ready to go, my friend?
Yes, ready to go.
All right. Well, I've hit the record button, and this is the To Be Encouraged podcast with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. We'll start the mark. Three, two, one, and mark. Hello, good people, and welcome again to the To Be Encouraged podcast with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. My name is Dr. Brad Miller, and Bishop Trimble and I engage in conversations about all matters of church and theology and matters of encouraging people in discouraging times. And Bishop, today let's have a little conversation about some topics you want to touch on today: grace and empathy. What brought this to your heart today, these areas of grace and empathy and sympathy?
Well, Brad, recently I lost my mother, and my siblings and I were able to be together and celebrate two great celebrations of life of a woman, a trailblazer, who lived to be 102 years old. So when you think about somebody who was born in 1922,
Hmm.
when bread was 35 cents a loaf so you think that she saw a lot of things, and one of the things that I learned and we learned from our parents, and particularly from our mother, was the importance of really not only being recipients of God's grace but also extending God's grace, meaning God's love without condition to others. And so I think that's something that may, Brad, be sometimes it seems like in a short supply, both in the political and social arena of our globe right now. And I really want to emphasize to our listeners that there's a need for us not to waste God's grace, but
Yes.
really to be amplifiers of God's grace.
Well, let's kind of start there. What do you see are some of the evidences of the lack of grace that's going on in the world today, which we might also kind of term so the discouraging things are going on in our world? What are some evidence of that? And then we'll take a approach of what some of the solutions or the responses to that are. What are some evidences of lack of grace going on in our world right now?
Well, it seems to be, I mean, I don't want to just focus on our current uh, presidential leadership, but I do want to say there seems to be in our environment, almost in our society, Brad, this notion that we need to make enemies of each other. There's a need to make some people less human than others and less important than
Right.
others, and the whole criminalization of whole populations. There seems to be something about our suspicion of our neighbors, and this this unrelenting appetite for retribution.
Right.
And I don't know where that comes from, but we need to reclaim, particularly those of us who are people of faith. I'm a Christian. You're a Christian. We proclaim to be followers of Christ. We need to reclaim the matter of extending grace, God's love to other people, and recognizing permeating throughout our society. And with so many things happening, was a recent shooting
Mm.
at a Catholic school in Minneapolis. Uh, you know, we've got to find a better way to amplify God's love and God's grace, not in some kind of uh, wishy-washy way, but a serious commitment to really elevate the importance of all people and the dignity of human life
Yes.
in ways that we all can value.
It seems to me that terms like empathy and sympathy have kind of been turned on their ear a little bit by some folks. What do you think? How do those terms come into play? Maybe give me a definition of your understanding of empathy and sympathy as we relate to this issue.
Well, I think I experienced both of those recently with the death of my mother. I think empathy is when sometimes people express feeling with you something, right, that you're going through. Sympathy is feeling for you. Both of those are have their appropriate place. Some people say, I feel sorry that your mother has passed away, and some people have said, I lost my mother, so
Mm.
I empathize with that. I recently lost a loved one. A year ago, we lost one of my brothers.
Yes.
2 years ago, one of my wife lost a brother. So when people say, I also lost, there were several people at the celebration who recently lost loved ones as well.
Sure.
They were, I think, able to more empathize with us. And but it's also appropriate to express sympathy. Something bad happens. We can I can sympathize with those who have lost life through mass shootings. I've
Right.
never experienced that.
Yeah.
I haven't lost a loved one to a mass shooting, but I certainly sympathize. So empathy, I think, is more feeling with someone, connecting in that sense of of a common experience. Sympathy is appropriate, and Christians should be strong in both of those areas.
Yeah.
Um, should be strong in both of those areas. But what is even more important, I think, is having a healthy understanding, Brad, of grace is not just something that God extends. Some would call it God's redemption at Christ's expense, or God's unmerited love and favor for us.
Yes. Yes.
And Methodists, we've got a number of, I don't want to call them categories of grace, but prevenient grace and
Sure.
sanctifying grace.
Right.
But at the end of the day, God loves us. How come we can't find a way to really express that love to more people, if not all people? It seems like we're
Hmm.
shrinking. We keep shrinking the crowd of people that deserve grace.
Yeah, it just seems like that's antithetical to the message of Christianity overall, but also often a religious message that many faiths have of a greater love for, and then it seems like many folks these days have really uh, uh, warped that or manipulated that whole thinking to greater love is just for people who kind of look like me or talk like me or in my little niche or my group here. And it seems to me that there's no greater time than right now than for us to embrace grace for its full meaningfulness of what that is all about, and to help, I believe, teach grace, because it seems to me that a lot of people don't get it. They don't really know what grace is, apparently. And they are, so how are some ways that we can show grace and teach grace and help grace to be more, as you say, if grace has been shrinking, what can we do to expand it and make it more permeable to people?
I think a lot of people really connect with stories. And if we can be able to really value our stories and our own stories, and for us who are people of the Bible, we think about the Apostle Paul. It's so many things he writes about grace, but a lot of that is born out of his conversion experience.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
before we called him Paul, when he was persecuting followers of Christ, believers, uh, who considered them worthy of death and persecution, until he had his experience on the Damascus Road,
Hmm.
and literally was, I would call it, knocked over by God's grace through Jesus Christ.
Hmm.
And so, and while he was not a contemporary, meaning a disciple of Jesus Christ, his whole life after his conversion experience was really a testimony of God's grace. In fact, in First Corinthians, the 15th chapter, he says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am." And Brad, couldn't we all say that? Couldn't we all essentially quote Apostle Paul? By the grace of God, I am
I
what
am
I
what I.
am.
Yes.
I am what I am. And
Yes. I think.
his grace toward me was not in vain. And Paul goes on to say, I worked even harder. I went
Yeah.
harder to preach Christ Jesus because of God's grace.
Well, that's the fully evolved person is a man or woman of grace, and how they experience that and share that with others. When you say that phrase, "I am who I am because of grace," that means God has fulfilled us completely and totally. And to deny that, to shrink that back, is then saying that God is lesser than what we and maybe what God is less than what God can be. And I just don't think that's the way we should understand it. And a lot of this, I think, has to go with how we choose to lead, where we're leading with kind of God at the forefront, or if we're leading with us at the forefront. And you mentioned with some of our earlier conversations, you mentioned a book, Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And some people think, of course, leadership is kind of like, being out front, being forceful, and, you all follow me and all that kind of thing, and being a militaristic leader or a leader with
Mm.
force. But if I'm understanding the message of Jesus and what you kind of understood some of the messages of Brown's book, leadership has a different context. Can you say a little bit about leadership from leadership by servanthood or things of this nature?
Yeah, I think, yeah, as someone who's said that, I don't know if it's Lencioni or others, who said the only authentic leadership there is servant leadership.
Yeah,
And
servant leadership.
Jesus said, Jesus said, I come not to be served, but to serve.
Yes.
Yeah, and the greatest among you is the one who will serve. Brene Brown talks a lot about this in her book Dare to Lead. That leadership requires trust, vulnerability, and empathy. Which we talked about earlier. And she says, remember, empathy is the most powerful connection and trust building tool that we have, and it's the antidote to shame.
Yes.
Someone has said that humans are the only ones that continue to punish ourselves over and over for the same mistake that we make.
I know that's
And
a pretty consistent theme in Brene Brown's
mhm,
work
yeah,
is responding to shame, and
mhm,
I think that's a very good take on this, in the sense of we have not. A lot of us have just have not dealt with shame either individually or corporately, and
mhm.
then it comes out in unhealthy ways, where people then they deal with their own personal shame by trying to project it on others, or project it's kind of a one up type of thing on others, and that didn't work either, does it? That doesn't work.
It doesn't. It's been said that I've heard this said by counselors and others that hurt people hurt other people.
Right.
And you see this on occasion when then these mass shootings or people end up becoming abusers, and then you find out that they themselves have a history at some point have that. Now that's not an excuse because a lot of us have had, whether they call it ACEs, childhood
Oh yeah.
traumatic experiences. But that, we don't always end up hurting others, but it's not uncommon for hurt people to end up hurting people. And I believe that if we have a revolution of grace, that we could really help turn this human ship around, if you will. And hope I'm not being Pollyannish about it. I just believe I've seen it, I've experienced it, and like I most recently experienced it with the death of my mother, and the way in which people express love without hesitation and was just palpable. It was, you can literally feel grace. I mean, grace is something I believe you can actually literally feel God's love through human relationship.
Absolutely. And it seems to me that if you have, as you mentioned, not everyone who has, say, an abused childhood turns out to be an abuser, but something has broke the pattern for them. Something has broke a pattern
Mhm.
of there is uh, phenomenon that happens of generations of abuse or generations of bad behavior. But then someone has broken the pattern, gone on to have success in business or success in ministry or raising a family successfully. And there's choices, is what I'm trying to get at here, Bishop Trimble, that people make choices regarding this. And it seems to me if that grace comes into play here, if we accept that we are loved no matter what, then we have the opportunity to change our ways and to then change the way how we relate to other people. So it seems to me that this is where uh, people who have experienced grace can share that with others in the church and through personal encounters, things of that nature. So, what are some suggestions or thoughts you might have about how we, as people, men and women of grace, can help those who are not experiencing love and grace to break those patterns and to, as you say, you're hopeful for the human race, and yet we know there are discouraging people and discouraging times out there. What are some pattern breakers you think here?
I think one of them is the act of listening.
Hmm.
Brene Brown, not only Brene Brown, others talk about this as well. In fact, I think the Bible really helps us with that in Psalms 40
Sure.
46. To be still and know that I am God. Oh, the act of listening is in the words of Brene Brown, an act of vulnerability. You know, I'm willing, Brad, to listen to your story and your journey, and your sorrows and your victories.
Sure.
Quite frankly, that's an act of vulnerability, and I think that's something that can help break what I call this pattern of the erosion of compassion in our society. There seems to be an
Wow.
erosion of compassion in our society, and we've got to break that pattern. And I think the act of listening is one. I think helping to clarify our values and uplift our values. Felicia Rashad says, "When your values are clear, your decisions are easy."
Hmm.
Now, my
Yes.
decisions aren't always don't seem to be easy, but that is true. When I'm clear about what's important or my mission and values, Brad, you know this for yourself as well. When we have our mission and values, then some of our decisions become easier because they align with those things that we've said are important. My parents emphasize, and the older I get now, I look back and said, I wish I was more grateful then. They emphasize the importance of prayer and having your own prayer life and in your family having prayer. And also, you know, I kind of, you're the son of a preacher. We were force fed church, but you know, now I have my own appetite for God, if you will. I have my own appetite to give thanks for the God's grace in my life. So the power to choose is something that we can exercise. And I would hope that those who are listening to this podcast will recognize that you and I have the power to choose. We can choose an attitude of gratitude. We can choose to carve out time to listen. We can choose to walk with people, whether it's a walk of empathy or a walk of sympathy from time to time, or if simply it's the ministry of presence. You
Yes.
know, showing up, having the courage to show up, even when you don't know what the outcome is going to be.
Well, let me reflect back with you a little bit on what you've shared the last few minutes, which is very profound things to share. Thank you for sharing this. And how I think maybe we live in times when we can kind of increase the energy in some of these areas. You mentioned about having a mission and values. And I think that's so important. And you mentioned how with your mother and mentioned, my folks and others have imparted on us mission and values. But I think a lot of people these days are having trouble defining mission and values. And maybe that's where the amplification can come in from folks like yourself and others to help people to gain clarity about their mission, about their values. You also indicated that the skill of listening is uh, so important. People want to be heard. And I think that's one of the reasons that so many people who are hurtful to others are screaming out, I want to be heard. And even if I have to, be violent, I'm going to be heard. One thing we do know for sure is people who, do commit mass murders and things like that, people do hear their names. And even if, things like that, even if it's ugly, terrible way to do it. But it seems to me the listening, we live in a time with social media and everything else, and those are great tools in many ways, but they also can bombard us with constant messages that we don't have quiet time. It may be if we can be ones who help to create the framework or create the opportunities for quiet to happen or for listening to happen. Maybe that's something we can do in the church and things like that. And then you mentioned gratitude. I just think that's so important too. And that, you know, let's not live in a world where the first thing we go to is what we don't have, what we lack. Maybe we can go to what we have and celebrate that and kind of let that be our first step instead of our reaction, to things. And I think it's another area where the church and leaders, true leaders, can help people say, okay, what are you grateful for? What are your assets? What do you have going for
Mhm.
you going in? This is one of the things that some of the people I work with in cancer counseling, yeah, you've got a bad diagnosis, but what do you have? What do you have going for you? You have, family and friends, you have your hair in some cases, and you have ability to walk and things, situations like that. So, what do you have? What are you grateful for? And then, of course, you mentioned prayer. Uh, we are kind of bereft of praying sometimes, and we just need to. Those people of faith, need to be, praying, and I don't want to be trite about that because sometimes we can be trite about, hey, somebody got shot. I'll give you thoughts and prayers. Well, yes, thoughts, prayers, but also work to alleviate gun violence. Thoughts, prayers, but also alleviate hunger. Thoughts, prayers, and also help with people who are in abused situations to have peace in their life. It's not just that, prayer is what, the power of prayer comes into play when we apply the power. So that's one of the things I want to respond to you about. I don't know if you have any response to my response to you, but that's, I see us as a time needing to amplify some of these opportunities we have in the church.
Well, let me share something. Yesterday, I had a chance to go to a place. I know you've been there because we both went to Garrett Seminary. We both lived in Evanston, Illinois, for a period of time years ago, way
Mm-hmm.
back when.
Right.
But I went to the Baha'i
Oh
Temple.
yeah, I hadn't even thought about that
I
place
had
for
not
quite a
been
while.
there since I had not been there since I was actually in seminary. So
Yeah,
that that was a long, long, long time ago. I went with a group of United Methodists to the Baha'i Temple in Wilmette, I guess it is, outside of
I
Evanston,
think I think
and
so. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful place. But we had a guy who met us on the steps, and he was Baha'i, and he was originally from Iraq, but he then now was living in New Jersey. But he had come to Chicago to go to the Baha'i Temple. He'd never been there before, but he was practicing. He gave us a 20-minute explanation of the faith. But here's something that stuck with me, and we went in for what they call a kind of a prayer service. They just read scripture and prayers, and someone sang a cappella uh, songs. Uh, but he said they don't call their they don't. He just said we don't have churches. He said what you all would call churches, we call houses of justice.
Hmm.
A house of justice.
Interesting. Well, I lost you again, my friend.
Why we call our places that you would call local churches houses of justice, because
Yes.
he said he believes that all people of faith should be working towards peace and justice.
Hmm.
I said, well, that's right. That's right up our. Maybe we should change our churches and call them houses of justice. Jesus said when he overturned the money changers' tables in the temple, he said, "My house must be a house of prayer."
Yes.
So I don't know. This late in ministry as a retired bishop, maybe a bit late. I said maybe we should have a movement to change our churches to houses of justice.
Well, it seems to be they're in alignment. If you're praying, you are praying for just life. You're praying for justice in this world,
Um,
and too much of it has been left to others to define, and they often have defined it based on heavy-handedness and not anything close to grace and love and justice. Has been more based on whatever their agendas are. And I do agree with you wholeheartedly. It's time to reclaim grace and the power of grace and prayer and justice. And certainly we can learn from the Baha'is. We can learn from others who are expressing their faith in their own ways. And yet we have opportunities here to express our faith and to help change the world. I know that's your passion. Your passion, as you've mentioned to me and to our audience here on the To Be Encouraged podcast many times, your mission is what? To encourage what? 1 million people? 2 million people? 5 million
2 million,
people?
2 million, two
Two
million, to
million?
encourage all people with the love of Jesus Christ to rise to the highest potential. 2 million people, and we're on our way, Brad, with your help and many others, and other ways in which we like to communicate in 2025, going into 2026. And notwithstanding, I'm not going to be quiet about the injustices that I see, whether it's the starvation of children in Gaza,
Mm-hmm.
and this is it's or whether it's the unseen stories of happening in places all around the globe. we've got to. I was inspired being at a Baha'i temple. I'm not a Baha'i, but I respect having been in that place and watching, looking at the scriptures that and the prayers that are up on the ceilings of the temple, and to hear this young man who was probably in his late 20s so passionate about his faith speaking of the houses of justice.
Yes.
And I said, boy, I believe sometimes God uses other people to give witness to us to say, we need to step up our own faith. We need to step up our own witness. And I want to close, Brad, by reading the text in Romans, because I
Yes.
think this might be encouraging to someone from Romans, the 12th chapter. For by the grace given to me, I bid everyone, we assume this is the Apostle Paul, that this has been written by. I by the grace given to me, I bid everyone among you not to think of yourself more highly than they ought to, but think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith which God has assigned you. For as in one body we have many members, all of the members do not have the same function. So we, though are many, are one body in Christ, individually members one of another. This is Romans 12, beginning at verse 3 through 5 so far. Having this gift that differs according to the grace, here again the word grace, given
Mm.
to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith; if service, in our serving; if one is teaching, in their teaching; if one who exhorts, in their exhortation; if one who contributes liberally with generosity, let them give aid with zeal. Whoever does acts of mercy, do it with cheerfulness. And then let me conclude with verse 9. Let love be genuine. Hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good.
Well, awesome. I love to hear you share the words of scripture there because they are indeed encouraging. And your mission, of course, is to encourage 2 million people. And indeed, a part of what the emphasis today on grace and empathy and sympathy and listening and all the various topics we've covered today, skills we have, gratitude, and so on, are all a part of this process here. And if we just apply what you read there from Paul, we'd be in pretty good shape. So appreciate you sharing today. And hey, let's charge on, my friend, towards our goal of encouraging 2 million people. What do you say about that?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, that's what our mission is here at the To Be Encouraged podcast with Bishop Julius C. Trimble. And you've been listening to this podcast where we look to offer an encouraging word to an often discouraged world. Close. All right. We had a couple breaks there, but I'm sure we'll get through it. I'll fix it in the editing process there. We'll get it. We'll get it together. Did you want to
How are
try
you
to?
doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm been working on my book here recently. I'm working on editing that thing up, and
What's
so
the title of that book you told me?
working title is Healing with Hope and Humor, and then it's a little bit about my own faith journey and my journey through my cancer process and how I like to be encouraging to other people in that right way. I'm working with a coach on that a writing coach on that, and so that's one of the things I wanted to mention to you. If you're interested at all, I could. So anyway, I've been working on that, and I hope to get
How
that out.
far along are you?
Well, I've written the first draft,
Oh, well, good.
about 180 or so pages, and it'll probably be by the time it's all said and done, it'll be about 45,000 words, something like that. That's why I think it's about 36,000 now. I think it'll be a little more than that when it's all said and done, but I'm looking forward to getting that taken care of the next 3 months or so here and get that thing out in the world. But
Okay.
I'm learning a lot of stuff here about book writing and things like that and how to get it published and out in the world, beyond just getting it on a shelf somewhere, but getting it well known through podcasting and things like that. I'm learning a lot about that, and I'd be glad for us to have some conversations around that about getting some more of your writing out there and maybe taking some of all these podcast episodes we've been doing and putting that together. Are you still interested in that type of thing,
I,
Julius?
I am. I am. Can I call you? My wife is called me twice now.
Yeah,
So that means,
you can
let
call
me
me.
call you back. I'll call you. Are you going to be busy?
No, I'll be here. You can call me on the phone if you want to, or if you or this. I'll be on this as well. You
Okay.
however you want to do it.
L- Let me call you on the phone.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay.
I'll be here.
Okay. Yeah.
Talk to
I
you
need to
later.
call her back. Okay.